Hello everyone, good evening. I hope you were all able to get the software installed over the weekend. So, yeah, okay, fine. Can you all hear me properly? Yeah, okay, thank you. So today let's continue from where we left off. So last class, we just got the software installed, and then we looked at an introduction to databases, and we got a general idea how to use the workbench, right? So we had created a table and we inserted some records into it. So today we will go in order. We will see, if you remember when we talked about RDBMS, we said if you learn a certain set of SQL commands, you can use it on any RDBMS, any RDBMS server, right? So we will see what are those core set of commands, right? Then we will go through those commands one by one, right? So that is what we hope to achieve today. So so let me just write down what are the core commands that you can apply on all RDBMS servers, right? So if you think of SQL commands, you can categorize them into these categories, right? So let me just write it down. So SQL commands belong to these categories. So the first category of commands that we will be looking at is called DDL commands. So DDL stands for data definition language. So data definition, in the sense we will be talking about the structure of the tables or structure of the database, right? So we will not be dealing with the data here. So here we will be only talking about the structure, right? So under this category, we have a set of commands. We have a set of 5 commands. So you have the create command, you have alter command, then you have the drop command, then you have a rename command, and finally you have truncate. So these set of 5 commands form your DDL commands, right? So these deal with the structure of your database. So if you want to remember, shortcut to remember this is you can remember Dr. Cat, right? So these are the DDL commands. So where T stands for truncate, A stands for alter, C stands for create, D stands for drop, and R stands for rename, right? So the Dr. Cat commands, the 5 commands are what forms the what we call the DDL or data definition language, right? The next category is called Dml commands. So Dml stands for data manipulation. So this is where we talk about the actual data, right? So till now in the DDL commands, we are only talking about the structure. In DML, we will talk about the actual data. So basically, I mean, specifically to write data. So when you say write data, what we mean is we want to insert, right? So we want to, we want to insert a record into the table, right? So that is adding a new record into the table. So insert, you have update to make changes to records that are already existing, and then delete to remove records from a table, right? Don't worry, I'm just compiling the commands here. We will go through them one by one, right? So these are what we call the DML commands, or the data manipulation commands. The next set is called the Dql command. There is only one command in this category, right? So this stands for data query language. So this is basically to read data. So when you say read data, we want to see what are the contents of the table, right? So we want to see what is inside the table. So there is only one command under this, which is the select command, right? Yeah, that's right. And then we have what is known as Dcl commands. So Dcl stands for data control, right? So this is one thing that we will not spend time on. The reason being, this is something that comes under the job description of a database administrator, right? So basically this deals with permissions, right? So we will just see what are the commands under that, right? So you have grant, which is used to give certain permissions to users. Revoke is to take away certain permissions, right? So basically any operation that you perform. Rahul, I have not discussed any of these commands, right? So we will be coming back to this, right, to look at it in detail. So Dcl is something that we will not talk about, right? Because this is not what a database developer is expected to do. But just to tell you what these commands are, any operation that you do on a database, right? So whether you want to create a table or put some records into it, or you want to modify a table, you want to drop a table. So every one of these activity requires a specific permission to be given to you. Only then you will be able to execute those commands, right? So the Dcl commands are the commands that are used in order to give permission to certain users. And this is done by the DBA. The DBA is the person who is the administrator of the database server. He is responsible for creating and maintaining the database, creating users, giving them specific permissions, creating different databases on the table, databases on the server, right? So all those comes under the job description of a DBA. It's enough to know that there is something called Dcl. And there are two commands, grant, which is used to give certain permissions to users, and revoke is used to take away those permissions, right? So this we will not go into detail. Finally, we have something called Tcl command, or the transaction control command, Tcl. So this stands for transaction control. Transaction control. So this is where we talk about saving and rolling back, right? Save and undo commands. So the commands that come under this category are your commit, rollback, right, and save point. Okay, so these are the different commands that come under this category. So these are the basic set of SQL commands that you can use on any RDBMS database, right? So fine, any questions? Which commands are frequently used? For a data analyst or a data scientist, DML and Dql are the ones that you will commonly use, but you are also expected to understand a little bit about DDL, right? So these three categories is what we will focus on, right? So this transaction control also, it is only required if you're writing application programs and all. But for a data analyst, what is commonly required? DML and Dql, right? So here, although you see only a single command, some 80–85% of the time, this is what you will be using in your job, right? But you should also know, you should also understand how to create a table, how to create a database, how to make changes to the table and stuff like that. So these three categories, first three categories. So what we will do now is we will go through each and every command one by one, right? And we will see different ways in which you can use the same command, different variations of the same command, right? So we'll start with the create command. We have already done that in the last class, right? If you remember, we have done a create table command. So we have used the create table, right, in order to create the table in our database. So the main thing here, when you look at this command is, of course, you have to create a table, right? So these are known as keywords. So you have to specify create table, the name of the table, right? But then these things, this is up to you, right? So what columns do you want? And what is the data type of that particular column? So in order to create a table, what you need to understand is the data types. What are the data types that are supported by Mysql? Here we have used some basic data types, right? So we have used integer for numeric value and character for this, right? But we didn't go into details about why we have chosen char or why we have put 30 here and all that, right? So if you understand what all data types are supported in MySQL, you will be able to create your tables, because that is all you need to specify, right? The column name and what data type, column name and data type, right? So this is what is expected. So let's quickly look at the different data types supported in MySQL, right? So if you look at the different supported data types, you will see, sorry, today is day 2, right? I need to open the day 2. Right. Right. So these are the basic numeric data types. So when you talk about data types, we have data types dealing with numbers, right? So data types. So you have numeric types, right? So where we talk about numeric value or numbers. So here you can have integral type of data. When you say integral, we mean whole numbers, right? Whole numbers. Or this could be non-integral. That is, these can be fractions, right? Fractions. So numeric data types, you can have integral and non-integral, or whole numbers and fractions. And then you have character type of data, right? So there are 2 basic character type of data. You have character and variable length character, or varchar. So these can support up to 255 characters. The maximum value that you can put inside these columns is 255, right? So anything more than that, you have what are known as text type of data types. If you want to put certain descriptions, for example, if you have a product table and you want to give a description of a particular product, you cannot probably do it with 255 characters, right? So if you want anything more than that, you have text type of data types. And then you have the date and time related data types, right? So these are very important data types, because you can do a lot of manipulations using date, time and all, right? So we have date and time related data types. And finally, there is binary data type, right? So this is to put binary data. When you say binary data, things like photographs, right? MP3, basically any binary file, if you want to upload, you can define a column of type binary, right? So actually it's called a binary large object, or a blob. Blob stands for binary large object, right? So these are the different data types. So let's look at the categories of these, right? So when it comes to numeric data types, when it comes to integer itself, right? So we saw integer is for whole numbers, no fractions, right? So numbers like 27, 355, right? 432, 1000. So these are all whole numbers. So if you want to store whole numbers in your database, right, you will declare a column of type any flavor of this integers. What is the difference between these types of integers? If you look at the maximum value that can be stored, right? So if you declare a column to be of type integer, the maximum value that can be put inside that is this number, right? Similarly, if you have declared a particular column to be of type 255, tiny int, right? The maximum value that you can put into it is 255. So if you want to store a number more than this, right? If you want to store 256 or 300 or something, then tiny int will not be enough, right? You have to go for the next highest data type, which is the small int, right? So small int can store up to so many characters, this is the maximum number that you can put into a column of type small int. Medium int has this range, right? And big int has this big range of values, right? So, so if you have a column, right? So if you have a table, let's say you have a students table, and there are only 2 columns inside it, for example, right? You have a student name column, and let's say the age column, right? So if you're creating a column of type age, right, probably you can go for tiny int, right? Because you are not going to put any number more than 255 into this column. Maximum value might put will be 100 or 110 or something, right? So not beyond that. So since we are not going to store any numbers bigger than Akmal, these PPTs are available, right? I think it's already shared with you. So those are available for you, right? Right. So this is what we mean by tiny int, right? So if you are going to put a value, if you have a column called age, you can choose it to be a tiny int, because we know that definitely we will not put a number more than 255 into it. So why do we need so many different variations of integer? The main reason is the amount of memory that this will take up in space. The amount of space it will take up in memory, right? So integer might take 4 bytes. Tiny int will take only 1 byte of data. Small int might take 2 bytes. Medium int may be 3 bytes. And big int, 8 bytes. Right, I hope you remember you might have done some binary to decimal conversions and all in school, right? I don't know if you remember that. How much is 1 byte? 1 byte is 8 bits, right? So so 1 byte is 8 bits. So what is the minimum and maximum value you can put in 8 bytes? The minimum value that you can store will be all zeros, and the maximum that you can store will be all ones, right? So what is the maximum when you have 8 ones? How do you convert this to decimal? This is 2 power 8 minus 1, right? So that is 256 minus 1 or 255. Right? So that is why if you have 1 byte of data, 1 byte of memory, the range of values that you can store in this is 0 to 255. Right? Anything beyond this, you cannot store in 8 bits. Right? So that is why you have this limitation. Right? Basically, it has to do with how much space is required to store a data of type integer in memory. Right? If you're declaring a data type like this, Mysql will reserve 4 bytes for every value that is entered into that column, right? So this is the difference between these, right? So in addition, it is possible for you to store some negative numbers. You can store the sign of a number, right? If you want to store the sign of a number also, that is, if you want to store values like minus 253, right, minus 1, right? If you want to store the sign as well, positive and negative, then the range of values that you can put, right, will be exactly half. If you see 255 divided by 2, right, so that is the amount, that is the maximum value that you can put. So it's 127.5. So you can put from 127 to minus 128. Right? So why does it become exactly half? The reason is because if you want to store the sign of the number, you can think of it like the first bit, right? One bit is being used to store the sign of the number. Right, so 0 might mean positive and 1 might mean negative, right? So depending on that, you need 1 byte. You set aside 1 byte to represent the sign. So if 1 byte goes off to represent the sign, we are left with only 7 bits to store the magnitude of the number. So that means you can, the maximum value that you can put is 2 power 7 minus 1, right, which is 127. Right. Without the sign, you can put the maximum value is 2 power 8. Let's forget the minus 1 for the moment. Right. If you're going to store the sign also, you can only put 2 power 7. 2 power 7 is nothing but 2 power 8 by 2. Right. So that is why 255 by 2. Right. So that is exactly what you can store. Right, so the reason, it doesn't matter how many bits you have. If you are going to take away 1 bit to store the sign, you will have only the remaining number of bits, right? And that will always be, if you have 2 bytes, right? If you have 2 bytes, then how many bits do we have? We have 16 bits, right? Without sign. Without sign, we have access to 16 bits. With sign, we have only access to 15 bits. Right, so what is the maximum value that you can store? This will be 2 power 15. This will be 2 power 16 minus 1. So 2 power 16 is, sorry, 2 power 15 is actually 2 power 16 divided by 2. Right, so irrespective of how many bytes you're storing, if you are reserving 1 byte for storing the sign, then only the remaining bits are available to store the number, and that will be exactly half of the magnitude that you can store. Right. So these are the different flavors of integer that you have based on the size of the data that you want to store in that particular column. Right. Coming to fractional data, we have float. Right, so we have double and you have decimal. So float, the difference between float and double is how many digits can we have, right, in the decimal place? How many decimal places can you have? So if you have a floating point number, then you will be able to store values like 25.3, right, or 1.372. 125.365432, right? So like this, how many decimal places can you go? If you have a floating point number, you can go up to 24 decimal places, right? So 123.24 decimal places you can go. Similarly, if you have double, right? If you have declared a data type to be of type double, then you can go up to 53 decimal places, right? So you can say 25.153263457. So like this, you can keep going up to 54 decimal places, right? And here you can go up to, I think this is 53, right? 53 decimal places you can go. So this is called double precision, right? So this part is called the precision of the number. And double basically means double precision, right? So many decimal places you can store. You can go up to that much, level of what do you say, precision. So how do we declare a variable of type float? You have to declare, it is declared like m comma d. So it depends on what is the maximum value that you want to store. And the, okay, let us say you want to store numbers like 1.23, 3.56, 7.20. That is, you are saying you will not exceed values like 9.99. You will not put any value beyond that, right? If this is how your data is going to be, you can declare your data type to be of type float. You want 2 decimal places, right? So this is 2 and totally 1, 2, 3, 3 digits, right? So you will declare this as 3, 2. What if you want to store numbers like this, 23.54, 16.76, 14.25? So what we are saying is we will not exceed anything beyond 99.99. So in this case, you can declare a variable float of 4, 2, right? Or if you have 1.375, 2.642, 5.315, right? If this is what you are going to store, 9.999, that is the maximum you are expecting, then you can say float of 4, 3, right? So how many decimal places you want, right? And the total number of places. It depends on what is the maximum value that you expect to put in that particular column. Okay, so how many decimal places? The D is the number of places after the decimal. And this number M is the total number of 1, 2, 3, 4 digits. Right, so totally 4 digits and 3 of them are decimal places. Right. How many digits can we go to before the decimal point and float and double? So that is what we are saying. See, if you want to go like, if you want to go up to 24 decimal places, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, like this, if you want to go up to 24 decimal places, then you can go for floating point. If you want to go up to 54 decimal places, right? So then you can go for the double precision. This is rare, right? So majority of the operations that we will do in real regular applications, float is more than enough, right? Finally, you have something called decimal. So decimal is very similar to your float, but decimal is used whenever you are dealing with currency, right? Whenever you are dealing with money, anything to deal with, if you're entering some dollars or rupees or something, anything to deal with currency, you will go for decimal, right? So why? The reason is, see, when you're storing a number in the backend, right? So it will not, so let's say you have a number called 33.310. This will not be directly stored into memory, right? So this will be converted into binary, right? And the binary version is the one that will be stored in the memory. So the whole digits, this part, it's not a problem, right? You can convert it properly. But when it comes to fractional part, when you're converting fractions into binary format, sometimes you cannot precisely convert it, right? For example, if you have something like 10 by 3, right? So what will be the result for this? I can never get a precise value for 10 by 3, right? Because this is going to be 3.3333333. It will keep going. It will not stop. So at one point we have to stop it. Otherwise it will keep on going, right? So like that, when you try to convert a fractional number, when you try to convert a fractional number into binary, sometimes you will not be able to completely convert it, right? So it might keep going like 101101110101, right? So like this, it will keep going. So at some point, Mysql will terminate it, right? And it will only put this many digits into it. So what will happen when you retrieve it back? You will not get 23.310. Instead, you might get something slightly lesser than this, right? So you might get 23.30995 or something, but it will not be exactly equal to 0.310, right? Because while storing, some kind of truncation has happened, right? So when you're converting it back, this will cause a problem. So if you use decimal, right, so it will internally take care that this kind of truncations don't happen, right? It will follow its own logic. So so it will make sure that it will not create such truncations. So although this seems to be a very small difference, right, what will happen is, especially with money, right, if you are adding up large columns of data, if you are trying to tally some, few lakhs of records, these small values will get added up. Small differences will become considerable. right? So you will see that it's not, maybe it's not tallying by $1 or something, but still in monetary transactions, this could be important, right? So the only thing that you need to remember here is, if at all you are asked to store, right? So in an interview or something, they'll give you a scenario and they will tell you, create a table for this. What all columns would you put in it? Right. So it is up to you to say, I will put these, I'll want to store these columns. And maybe there is a column called currency where you are storing some value of currency. It could be sales, it could be salary, it could be something, right? So anything to deal with money. So that particular column, you have to declare it to be decimal. Right. The other floating point numbers, like some percentages, right? Any commission percentage, right? That could be stored as floating point number. Maybe there is a 15% commission for a particular sale or something. So those things you can use a float or a double. You will rarely need a double, right? But anything where you are putting some money, you should always make sure that you declare it to be of type decimal. Right. So these are the numeric data types that we have. All the different flavors of integers, they are used to represent whole numbers, and fractions are represented using floating point, float, double, or decimal. Right. Specifically, money related data, you have to go for decimals. Right. So these are your numeric data types that are supported. The next type of data types are character type data. We have already seen this character, right? So if you have a column called student name, for example, you can declare this to be of type character followed by some number within bracket, right? So what that number says is, see, if you put 30, for example, what we are saying is we will put names into it, but that name will never exceed 30 characters. If you exceed 30 characters, then you will get a error. If you try to insert a name which is more than 30 characters long, then you will get a error here. Right. So what is the maximum limit that you can put here? You can go up to 255 characters. Right. So character of 255 is the maximum number that you can put. Right. So there is something called varchar, or variable length character, which is also used to store character data types, and it can store up to a maximum of 255 characters. Right. So what is the difference between character and variable length? Because both are character types, right? So both of them give you a range of 255 characters. The difference is how much memory is used at the backend, right? So if you have a table, let's take the same example that we just took. If you have a table which contains only the student name and age, right? So let's say we have declared student name as character of 30 and age as integer, right? We know so what will happen when you are inserting a record, right? If you try to insert a record into this particular table, right? If you say insert into students, right, values, let's say Joe, and she is 23 years old. Right? When you're inserting this record, Mysql will try to find some space in memory. Right? It has to go and write it somewhere in memory. So what Mysql will do is it will reserve certain space for this particular record. So when it is reserving the data, when it is reserving the space, it will not look at what you are entering, right? So it will not worry about what exactly you are entering. Instead, in order to find out how many memory it needs to reserve, it will look at how you have declared the columns, right? So here you have declared a character of type 30. So what we are saying is we might put anything up to 30. We are only promising that we will not exceed 30, right? So it can be anything within 30. So it will reserve a space, right? Enough space to store 30 characters, right, for name. And we know integer takes 4 bytes, right? For more than 255, we have text type of data, right? We'll come to that. But before that, okay. So is it necessary to declare the size? If we don't, will it give an error? It will not give you an error. If you don't specify the size, it will assume that you're going to put only one character into it. Right? If you just say character and don't give anything within the brackets, it will assume that only one character will be entered. Right? Okay, so in this case, it will reserve enough space to store 30 characters, and then 4 bytes will be reserved for the integer, the age column, right? 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 bytes will be reserved for age, and 30 characters, let's say one character takes 1 byte, right? So it need not be, but let's say it takes 1 byte, at least 1 byte it will take, right? So here it reserves 30 characters, 30 bytes of data, right? And then here it reserves 4 bytes of data, right? Yeah. It considers white spaces also, right? Because you want to retrieve those white spaces. So, so now so much data is reserved for this particular record. But how much is the record actually using? It's only using 2 characters here, and we need only 1 byte to put 23, right? So if you have 1 byte, you can put up to 255. So to store 23, I need only 1 byte. So how much space am I wasting for one record? Right? So I'm wasting 28 bytes plus 3 bytes, right? So 31 bytes I'm wasting for one record, right? So imagine if you have 1,000,000 records in your table. Even if you ignore the character type of data, only for the integer data type, we will end up wasting 3 million bytes, right? Because 3 bytes are getting wasted for one record. If you have 1,000,000 record, then 3 million bytes are getting wasted only for the age, right? And you can imagine how much wastage there is for the character type of data, right? So instead of declaring this as character, if you declare it as varchar of 30, in this case, Mysql will only look at what is the data that you're actually entering, right? So let's say we declare the student name as varchar of 30 and age we declare as tiny int. Now how much space will it reserve? It will only reserve 2 spaces for the name for this particular record, right? It will only use up 2 spaces and 1 space for the, 1 byte for the age. Right? So you can see the difference in memory, the usage, when you compare these 2 ways of storing the record. Right? If the next record is, let's say, John, right? You are entering John and he is 35 years old. Again, how much space will this declaration take up? It will take up only enough space needed for 3 characters and 35, right? So only this much it will use. So varchar or variable length character basically helps you to save memory, right? So this helps you to save memory, saves memory. But there is a slight disadvantage of using varchar, because if you are fetching data, if you are selecting records based on this particular column, it will be slightly slower. Whereas if you have declared it to be of type character, the retrieval will be faster, right? So this is faster retrieval, but memory wastage, right? So memory wastage. Here memory is saved, but slower, right? So we will choose, when we are creating our table, we will choose which type we want to use. When will we go for character type of data then? Because it looks like varchar is more efficient, right? So when do we go for character type of data? When we know that every record, right? Every record will definitely take up, for example, let's say I am declaring a column to be of type character of 5. If I know every record in the table will definitely take up 5 characters, right? So then I can confidently declare it to be character of 5, because I will be sure that there will be no wastage. All 5 spaces or 5 characters will be used up. Right? For example, what examples can we think of records, all records taking up same amount of data? What any examples you can think of? Every record will have the same number of characters. Course name, okay. See, course name will be the same if everybody is taking the same course, right? All students are taking the same course, then it's fine. Yeah, PAN card number is a good example, right? Because everybody in India will have, I think, 10-digit PAN card, right? PAN number, Aadhaar number, vehicle number, right? Employee ID probably, right? So every employee might be given a 6-digit employee ID, or some bank accounts, right? So maybe every customer in a bank will be given a 15-digit customer number, right? If you know that every record is going to use up exactly this many number of characters, you can go for, yeah, passport number. Yes. Yeah. Sakshi is saying mobile number. Okay. Can you tell me mobile number? What will be the data type? Mobile number, is it a numeric value or is it a character value? Yeah. Most people are saying numeric, but actually we don't need a numeric column to store phone number. When will we need numeric column? Only if you want to treat whatever you are storing inside that as a numeric value. That is, if you want to perform any arithmetic operations on it, then you can treat it as a numeric value. But we are not going to do any arithmetic operations on phone numbers, right? You are not going to multiply your phone number with somebody else's phone number, or you are not going to add 10 to your phone number or subtract something from your phone number. So we will never use the phone number as a numeric value. So I can very well declare it to be of type character of 10. Right? Because I just want to retrieve the number. I don't want to do any arithmetic operations on it. Right? So phone number is a good example. See, you are adding plus 91. That is fine. But see, if my number is 7050605050, I'm not going to add 91 to this. Right? 91 is attached to the beginning of this. So in that case, I have to treat this as like a string value, and then I have to attach some more string to it. Right? You are not going to add 91 to this. If you are doing this kind of addition, then yes, you have to treat it as a numeric value. Right? So we will never perform any arithmetic operations on our phone number. Right? So you can, phone number is a good example. Mobile number or a phone number, right? You can declare it to be of type character of 10, and I can be sure everybody's phone number is going to be 10 characters. Things that can vary across different records, right? So like numbers, name, address, right? So these kind of information, you can make it as variable character. And you can safely declare it to be of type 255, because you can be sure that you are not going to waste 255, right? Only whatever is required will be taken, right? So you can go ahead and declare everything to be of type varchar of 255, right? Bank account number will vary, but the size will not vary, right? So everybody will have 15-digit number. When I say email, what is Akshay? Email, is it character or varchar? Right. So when we say bank account, right, Let's say the first person's account is like HDFC 101020. The second person's account is HDFC 101021. But how many digits are there for every account holder? Right, so the number is the same, number of digits is the same. That is what we are saying. No, I am just giving you an example, right? If your account number looks something like this, maybe you have something like 20010105071. This could be your account number, but some other person will also have 20010105072. The number of digits for everybody will be the same. That's what I'm trying to say. Whereas if you look at the name, one person's name is Joe, the next person's name is John, the third person is Jonathan. Right? So the length of the number of characters is changing. So if that is the case, go for varchar. Right? Because varchar will only take whatever is required. It will take only 2 characters for this, 3 characters for this. I don't know how many characters for this. I hope that, yeah, area, pin codes, yes. Right, all those are examples of character type. So you can choose accordingly when you're creating a table, right? Once you understand what happens at the backend, you can properly choose the right data type, right? So that you end up saving memory, and you also ensure that your data retrieval is faster. Okay. Right. So these are this is the difference between your bank account is a char. Yes. You can use bank account as a character because you are not going to do any numeric operation on your bank account number, right? Okay, so these are your char and varchar. If you want more than that, if you want to store more than 255, right, then you can go for your text type of data. So text, you can have this size, medium text, you can have this much. Long text, you can store up to 4 GB of data in each column. That means you can type entire books into a column. Right? The contents of whole books can be written into a column. You can store up to 4 GB of data. Right? So this many characters you can store. Okay, so this is yeah. So this is unable to see my screen. Are you all able to see my screen? Yeah. I think everyone else is able to see, right? Yeah, thank you. Size of medium text is given here. This many characters. Right? So this is 65355 characters. No, not GB. This many number of characters. So here 4 GB. So 4 GB is this many number of characters. This is 4 GB. So many characters corresponds to 4 GB. Here this many characters. Right. Okay. So this is it about your character type data. Then the next important type of data type is your date data type, right? So here you have date and date time. So if you look at date, right? So this is the format in which you need to enter the data. So you have to give YY, month and day, right? This is so MM and DD. So this is the limit. This is the range of values that you can enter if you declare a particular column of type date, right? You can enter anything from 1st January year 1000 to 31st December year 9999. Right, so that is a date type of column. Date time, you can put date as well as time, right? If you look at date time, let's probably create a table. I'll just create a small table, right? And I will show you how to enter values of type date and date type, right? So to do that, I will use, I'll create a table. Shahrukh, you can change the format of the date when you are displaying it. when you're selecting, you can select it in a specific format, right? But if you are inserting, you have to specify it in the same format. This format only you have to use, right? So what I will be doing is, instead of using the workbench, I will use a different client because it's easier to show you the values, right? So here the display area is very small, right? It's difficult for me to show results in this, right? So I prefer to use the command line client. It doesn't matter what client I'm using. The same commands can be typed in your workbench also, right? It's just the interface that looks different. Okay, so fine. So I'll create a table called patients, create a table patients. Let's say I have the patient ID. I will make it integer for convenience. Then the name of the patient. This will be varchar, right? Because the name can be varying length. Varchar of 30, for example, right? And then I will get his date of birth. Date of birth will be of type date, right? And I will also get the time of admission, which is of type date time. That is, I want both date and time inside it, right? So now I have my table. If I describe patients, I can see that the patient ID is of type integer, patient name is varchar of 30, DOB is of type date, and time of admission is of type data, right? So now let's enter some values. So I'll say insert into patients values, patient ID 1. Anything other than number needs to be enclosed in quotes, right? So patient name, let's say Harry. His date of birth is, this also needs to be in quotes, right? Anything other than numbers should be in quotes. Let's say he was born in 1997, September 13th, right? So this is how you would enter the date. Now, time of admission, right? So let's say he got admitted yesterday. What was yesterday's date? 2022. March 6th. Let's say he got admitted at 7 o'clock in the morning, right? So after this, you have to give a space and then say 7:30:00. 7 hours, 30 minutes, 00 seconds, right? So close braces. So now I have entered one record. What is the name of this client? This is a command line client, right? Right. So this is how you enter values of type date and date time. So let's maybe enter one more value, right? So I'll say insert into patients values. Let's enter the second record. Patient ID is 2. Let's say his name is Potter. He was born, when was he born? Let's say 1998, July 23rd, right? So this is his date of birth. Time of admission, let's say he got admitted yesterday, but let's say he got admitted at 7:30 in the evening, right? So not in the morning. So this will be in 24-hour format, right? So you will say 2022, March 6th, give a space, 7:30 in 22-hour format. So 24 hours is 19:30, right? So 19:30:00, right? So this is how you can enter date and time. How do I see what is the value entered into it? You cannot enter it in any other format, right? You want to increase the font size. Is this fine? More. Okay. How about this? Okay, fine. Right. So now let us see, let's see what has gone into the table, right? So how do we look at it? We say select star from patients, right? So you can see two records inside it, Harry and Potter, the date of birth and time of admission, right? So this is how you can enter values of type date and date time, right? So going back to our data types, you can see timestamp looks exactly, the format looks exactly like your date time. Only thing is there is a range, the range is different, right? So only this many, this is the minimum value that you can put, and the maximum value you can enter is 19, 1, 20, 38. But and of course you have the time here. So the main difference here is, apart from the range of values that you can put into it, here the data gets stored in UTC format. What is UTC format? Earlier we used to call it GMT, right? So the Greenwich Meridian Time, right? So GMT. So this is same for okay, Uday is saying it's showing me an error. Probably you can paste your query on the chat, right? But we may not have time to look at everybody's errors. But Uday, go ahead and paste your query on chat. Okay, we'll take a look. Right. So GMT is Greenwich Meridian Time. So that is minus 5:30. Right. So if you search for what is the UTC time now, if you search for UTC time right now, it is 2:27 p.m. right? So it's around 5.5 hours behind. So when you are entering data, right, whatever date and time you are entering, it will be converted into UTC format and it will be stored in the backend. And then when you retrieve it, it will be converted back into your local timestamp, and then you will be then you can view it in your local timestamp, right? So that is the advantage of using timestamp. It'll you need it if you are working with the different time zones, right? If people are entering data into your table from different locations and different time zones, then probably you can go for your timestamp data, right? If you want to store more than this, then you don't have an option. You have to go for date type, right? So timestamp will only support this much. Finally, you have the time, and can you paste the command for insert? Okay. Cut out the MySQL and all, right? I won't, or I'll just put one command here. So in year 2040, we cannot use timestamp. Probably by that time, they would have come up with a different option, right? Okay. So now coming to time and year, there might be applications where you don't want the date, right? So you might want to have a column with the time only. So in that case, you can declare probably timesheet application, right? So you just want to log the time in and time out of everybody. So you will declare, you can declare it as time type, right? And only time can be entered in 24-hour format. There will be cases where you want only the year, right? For example, if you're looking at the profit, yearly profit, then having the full date doesn't make sense. Right, so here you will just say in 1990 this was the profit, 1991 this was the profit, 1992 this was the profit, and so on. Right, so we need only year. We don't want the full date. Date won't make any sense here. Right, so year can be in 2-digit format or it can be in 4-digit format. Then if it is 2-digit format, then you will be entering only 90, 91, 92, and so on. Right. While writing date or date and time, yes, you have to put it in double quotes. It need not be double quotes, it can be single quote also, but you have to put it in quotes. Anything other than number, right? Numeric values, integer, float, double, right? So anything other than that, you have to put it, you have to give it within quotes. Okay, so these are your date and time related data types. Finally, we have the binary data type, right? So what is called the blob or the binary large object. If you want to store some binary data like photographs, right? Your JPG, MP3, right? So if you want to load stuff like this, you can go for a blob type of data. Again, depending upon how big is your data, right? So you can either go for a tiny blob where you can store up to 255 bytes. Blob can store up to 65K, right? And medium blob can store up to this many number of bytes, right? So these are your basic data types in MySQL. So let's say we have a table, right? We have a table called employee. Can you tell me the data types? So I want the employee ID. What data type will we choose? Integer. Okay. Maybe you're saying integer and varchar. I think char would be a better option, right? Because it's possible that every employee is given a 10-digit employee ID. It could be something like E0001. Right, and the second employee could be 00002. Probably, I think where char would be a better option, right? Varchar will come. Varchar will come only if different employees have different lengths of. Somebody has 5-digit employee number and somebody has 6-digit. Then you can go for varchar, right? Probably, very likely that it would be. It could be, right, character or varchar. Integer is very rare, right? Because we won't treat employee numbers as numbers. Yeah, char can hold numeric and alphabet, right? Okay. Yeah, ename will be varchar, right? Because this can be variable. I can safely declare it as 255, right? Because it's not going to waste any space. Okay, let me write down all the columns that we might need. Ename, then date of joining, salary, let's say commission percentage. Then what else? Let's say I want to store his photograph and a short description of his resume. What else would we store? Let's say his PAN card number. Right. Date of joining. Yeah, phone number. Yeah. Date of joining, what would it be? Date. Yes. So date of joining will be date. Salary. Salary, we just said it anything to do with currency should be decimal. Right? It's better to give it as decimal. Yeah. Commission percentage. Percentage, it's just a percentage, right? So this can be a floating point number. We are just saying if you calculate the bonus or something, if you're multiplying salary into commission, you will get a currency value. But this is just a percentage that we are specifying. So that can be float. Photo. It's not BOL. Yeah, it's called blob. Right? It's called blob, binary large object. Yeah. Resume. Varchar. Okay, if he's a fresher, maybe varchar. Yeah, you can have text, right? Text would be a better option. And then PAN number, char. Yeah, character of some 10, right? Enough. I think I just wanted to take one example for each data type. That's all. So depending upon how you're going to use it, right? Now why varchar for PAN? Because everybody will have 10 digit only, no? Right? So that will be char. Right? So this is how you can decide what is the right data type to use for every column. Right? Resume, yeah, that is right. If you're going to upload a PDF format for resume, then you can make this as blob. But if you're just typing a short description of his experience, right? So maybe 2-3 paragraphs of it, then you can go for text. If you want to upload a PDF, then you have to go for the blob data type, right? After declaring as char, can we enter number without quotes? No, you cannot, because it is still treated as a character data type. You have to give it within quotes. I don't have the option to change that, right? So fine. Right, so I'll read out whatever questions people are asking so that everyone can know what is the query being asked. Right. Okay, so these are the basic data types in your MySQL. So now the next thing that we want to look at is, see, there is a special data type called where do I have to type this data? I'm not sure I get your question, but if you're creating a table called employee, right? So the create table command would be create table employee, right? And then you will have to specify emp ID. I want of type character of 10. E name will be of type varchar of 255, right? And so on. So when you're inserting values, you will insert into emp ID values E0001 because it's of type character. Name will also go into in quotes. So let's say Tom Cruise. Date of joining also needs to be in quotes, right? So let's say 1998, February 13th. Salary will be some decimal because it's a number. I don't have to give it within quotes. Let's say 2050.50 or 0.00. Right? So that is his salary. Commission percentage is also a number, right? So we don't want to, we will give it in float 0.15. To enter blob data, you have to use a load command, right? So this is slightly different way of entering. So you have to use load, and then resume, of course, text, it goes within quotes. You have to type whatever you want to type. PAN card also character, right? So you have to give it in, right? So ABQ, something like this. So this is how you will specify the data types. While creating the table, you will mention the data type. While entering data into the records, into the table, you will make sure that the right data type is specified. Okay, fine. What is written in brackets? Load. I'm just telling you that you have to use load command. I haven't given you the actual format here, right? So it's a separate way to enter blob. So let's not go into it now, right? So finally, there is a special type of data called the null data type, right? So null, although we call it a data type, it doesn't Mukesh, okay, what is the advantage of SQL for these operations? Are there any enhanced powers that operating in SQL gives us compared to Excel files? So Mukesh, if you think of an application like Amazon or something, right? So somebody is asking these questions. So if you think of something, an application like Amazon, for example, do you think they will build their application around an Excel sheet? Right? Will they use an Excel sheet or will they go for a database? Because database is not just storing of data. There is so many other things that goes into a database server. It has to take care of security. It has to handle access to data, right? So it's not just about putting some rows and working on it. A server provides you a lot of other options like disaster recovery, right? So many other things, right? So small amount of data, small manipulations you want to do, then you can go for an Excel sheet. But as a permanent storage, Excel is not a good solution, right? Okay. Can decimal data type hold negative values? Yeah, you can give negative values. If there is no record for a particular column for an entry, what needs to be done? Yeah, that is what we are talking about. If we don't know, right? So if you don't know what value goes into a specific column, we give a special type of data called null. You should not put null into quotes. If you put it in quotes, then what will happen? It will be treated as a character type data, right? So you should not give it within quotes. Null is just null, right? So you just need to type it as null. So null can be put inside data types, integer column. You can put null inside a character column. You can put null inside a date column, right? So this does not have any data type. All null means is null means unknown data. I don't know what it is, right? So that is what null means. So unknown data is what we mean by null. So that is how you need to interpret. You should not think of null as 0, right? So you should not think of null as blank, right? It's not 0 or blank, or it doesn't have any data type. If you say 0, then we mean some numeric value, right? If you say blank, we mean some kind of character data, right? So it doesn't have any data type. Null just means I don't know, right? So that is why you cannot use null in any kind of arithmetic operations, right? So if you look at your command line, you can use it as a calculator, right? So I can say something like this. I can say select 3 plus 4, right, as result. So this will give me the result 7, right? I can give some big multiplications. So I can say select 367 into 567, right? So this will give me the result of the multiplication. But if I use null anywhere inside this, right? So if you use sorry, we have to enter in workbench or where? Yeah, you can enter in workbench. Whatever I am typing here, you can enter in workbench, right? And it's only the interface that is different. All right. So now, how to restrict? Somebody is asking how to restrict entering a specific value into a column. It would be a disaster if you enter negative value. See, we will be talking about database constraints. Constraints are basically checks for data that is put into each column. So you can specifically impose a constraint saying that you cannot have negative values. We will see how to do that shortly, right? But let's focus on the data type right now. But we will be talking about constraints. Okay, fine. So here, so if you say something like select, right? So select 5 plus null, right? 5 plus null. You might expect 5, right? Or I don't know what you expect, but this will only give you null. right? So you cannot use any kind of arithmetic operations on null data type, right? So it will always result in a null, right? So it's a special kind of data. How to create a not null table? We will see how to do that, right? Please be patient. We will be looking at that. So null is just a data type which says I don't know what it is, right? So these are the different data types in MySQL. So now that we know what different data types are, right? We know how to create a table, right? So create a table is just, we will say create table, name of the table, and then column name data type, column name data type, right? So just like we created our employee table, you can just say create, right? So this is the very first command in our DDL category. Create table students, maybe student ID integer, student name varchar, right? So like this, whatever columns you want, specify that, data type, close it, semicolon, control enter, and your table will be created, right? Okay, so now comment is double dash and a space. Okay. Okay, so now we are done with DDL, create command. Where was it? Yeah. Where did we write all the commands? So we have seen how to create a table. We know what all data types goes into it, right? So now we can see how to make changes to a table after you have created it. So after creating a database, right? After creating a table, right? So how do we make changes to it? So what all things did we decide when we created a table? We decided what will be the name of the table, right? And then we decided how many columns we want, right? So we decided on having 4 columns, right? And then we decided what is the name of the data type, student ID, student name, age, and course, right? So we decided to have 4 columns. We decided what will be the names of these columns. Then we decided the data types, right? So we decided that this will be of type integer, this will be of type character of 30, right? And this we decided it will be of type integer, and course also we decided it will be of type character of 30, right? So this is how we created our table. Now, every aspect of this table can be modified. After creating the table, you can change all the aspects of the table. So here we have decided we'll have 4 columns. You can change it and add 1 more column or 2 more columns or any number of columns, right? So let's say I want to have 5 columns in my table. I want to add a new column called marks, right? So I want marks and integer. So this is possible, right? So I can add a new column to my table. I can remove a column from my table. I can decide that I don't want to have age anymore, right? I don't want to store age. I just want student ID, student name, course, and marks. Then I can decide to change the name of the column, right? Instead of SID, let's say I want to call it STDID. That can be changed. Data type I can change, right? Instead of char of 30, I think varchar of 30 would be better, right? So I can change the data type. I can change the name of the table. Instead of students, let's say I want to call it my class. So you can see every aspect of the table can be changed after creating the table. So how do we do that? You use the alter command, right? So you will say alter table, right? So the command to use is, we'll say alter table students, right? So let's say I want to add a column called marks. So now I will say add column add column marks, right? And then I have to specify the data type for this particular column. This will add a new column to my table called marks, right? What if I don't want to keep age anymore? I will say alter table students, right? And now I'll say drop column age. That's all. I don't have to specify the data type. Then what did we want to change? We wanted to change student ID, SID to STD ID, right? So to do that, we will say alter table students, change column SID to STD ID. Again, I have to specify the data type, right? See, there might be slightly different variations in this, slightly different variations in the syntax, but whatever syntax we are writing here, this you can apply on any database, right? So I'm just writing the common syntax that is applicable to do that, right? So there might be different options to do this, right? So whatever I'm writing here, this is the common thing that you can use across different databases. Okay, so I have said a change column, right? So SID will be changed to student ID, and I have to specify the data type, right? Then what else? I can change the data type, right? I want to change it from character to varchar. How do I do that? We'll say alter table students, and we will use the modify clause, right? So we'll say modify column student name and give the new value that we want. We want it to be of type varchar of 255, right? So this will change your data type. Finally, we can change the name of the table. So to do that, there are two ways to change the name of the table, right? So one is you can say alter table students, rename to, right? I can say rename to my class, right? So the table name will now be changed to my class. The other option, right? So the other option to change the table name is to use the rename command itself. So what is the difference here? So this is called the command, right? One second. So this is called the command, and this is called a clause. Clause is a subdivision of your command, right? So the alter command used with the add clause will add a new column to the table. Similarly, the alter table command used with the drop clause will remove a record from the remove a column from the table, right? So similarly, alter table command used with the rename clause will change the name of the table. The other option is to use the rename command itself, right? So the rename command itself can be used. I can say rename table, right? So my class back to students, my class to students, right? So these two are equivalent. Whichever one you want, you can use it. Okay. So shall we quickly try out these commands? I will just type, right? So you can watch and okay. Let me take my students table. Select star from students. So these are the four tables, four columns that we have. I'll add a new column, right? So I'll say alter table students, add column marks and the data type, right? So now if you say select star from somebody is asking, drop means delete the table or delete the attributes. See, drop command Insert will not work. Hold on. Drop is used to remove a table from the database. Right. So alter table used with drop is used to drop a column from your table. So that is why, okay, let us complete all the DDL commands, right? So then I'll tell you the differences. Okay, so alter table students, add column marks. Okay, somebody else has a question. Instead of alter, insert can also work. Not at all. The purpose of insert is to put a new record into the table. Here, we are not talking about records. We are not talking about the data at all. We are only talking about the structure, right? So you can think of the structure of the table as a house, right? And the people inside the house as records, right? So we have not come to the people inside the house. We are only talking about changing how the house looks like. We will talk about the people inside the house when we talk about Dml and Dql commands. Right, so that is where your insert, update and all will come in. So till now, we are only talking about the empty house and the shape and structure of the house. We are not talking about the people inside it, right? Please hold on. Let's complete all the DDL commands, right? So then you will understand the difference between drop and delete and all that. Okay, so alter table students, add column marks. Right, so then we have, so now if you say select, right, so select star from students, you can see a new column called marks has been added and the values inside it is null, right, because we don't know what are the marks for John and Mary. So MySQL has automatically put null into it, and null basically means unknown. I don't know, right, what is the value for the marks. I'm just adding a column here, but I don't know what value I need to put into it. Okay. So now let's remove a column from the table, right? So we'll say alter table students, drop column age, right? So now if you check your table, age column is gone, right? You have student name, course, marks, and student ID. Right, so we have removed a column from the table. Now, what do? We will change the column name, right? Instead of SID, we will make it STDID. So how do we do that? We say alter table students, right? Change column SID, STDID, and I have to specify the data type also. Right, so now if you check your table, you can see SID has now changed to STDID. Right, so next thing we wanted to change the data type. Right, so if you describe students, you can see that the student name is of type character of 30. I want to change it to varchar of 255. Right, so what I'll do, I'll say alter table students and modify column, right? Modify column S name. And what is the data type I want? I want varchar of 255. Right. So now if you describe your students table, you can see character of 30 has now changed to varchar of 35. Right. Sorry. Finally, we want to change the name of the table itself, right? If we want to change the name of the table, so let's say show tables. I hope you remember this command. Show tables will tell you what all tables are there in your database. Right, so we have two tables. One is called patients and the other is called students. Right. So now what we will do, we will change what is the difference between modify and change? We just looked at it, right? Modify will change the data type, change will change the name of the column. Modify will change this part, change will change this part. Okay. Okay, so now, okay, so we want to change the name of students, right? We want to change the name of the table itself. We want to call it my class. So we saw there are two ways to do it. One is we say alter table students, right? So rename to my class. Now, if you say show tables, you will see that you have two tables. One is called my class and the other is called patients, right? So you don't see students anymore. The name of the table has been changed, right? Abhi is asking, modify accepts char to integer. Char to integer, it may not accept because character is likely to have non-integer type of data, right? So when you're changing the data type, you have to be careful. You have to ensure that all the data type inside it can be actually converted. Otherwise, you will get an error. Okay. Okay, fine. So we have changed the name of the table using the alter table command. What is the other option? We can use the rename command itself. I hope you understand the difference between a command and a clause. Are you clear about the difference between a command and a clause? Right, so this is the command. These are parts of the alter table command, and that's called a clause. Here, rename is the command itself. The first thing that you type, that is the name of the command. Right, so here you are using the alter table with the rename clause. Here we are using the rename command itself. Right, yeah, okay, thanks. So let's use the rename command, right? So we'll use the other method to change the table name. We will say rename, sorry, we'll say rename table my class to students, right? So I'm changing it back to students. So now if I say show tables, it will say there are two tables called patients and students, right? So this is how you can use your alter table to change every aspect of the table that you have created. Okay, so here add is used to add a new column. Add clause is used to add a new column. Drop is used to remove a column from the table. Alter table with the drop clause, right? Alter table with the change clause, sorry, modify clause will change the data type of a column. Alter table with the change clause will change the name of the column, right? Alter table with the rename clause will change the name of the table itself, right? So these are the different ways in which you can use alter table. Please take some time, right? Not now, because we don't have time to spend more on this, but do go through the video, right? And you can try it out and you can yourself see what is the difference in all these commands. Okay, so this is your alter table, right? And the rename command. So if you go back to the list of commands, right? So we have looked at create, we have looked at alter, we have looked at rename, right? Let's quickly look at dropping. So drop, Aditi, I hope you are fine, right? Because I just showed you the difference. Yeah. A drop table will drop the table, right? So I don't want to drop any of these tables. So I'll create a table and I'll drop it, right? So I'll say create table, my tab. I'll just have an ID, integer, and name probably, right? Varchar of some 20 or 30. Right, so now if I say show tables, I will see three tables, right? My tab is something that I just created. Now I decide I don't want that table anymore, right? So in that case, what happens? What should I do? I have to say drop table, drop table my tab. Right. So now if you say show tables, you will see my tab is gone from your database. Right. So the table, if at all there is any content inside the table, that is also, oh, okay. That is also, that will also be removed from the table. Right. So you need to understand the difference between, see, there are three things that people get confused with, right? So drop command, alter table used with the drop clause, and the delete command, right? So these are the places where students usually get confused if you're learning for the first time. When you say drop table, if you take the example of house and people inside it, right? So if you say drop table, right, you are demolishing the house itself, right? If you're saying that is a horrible looking house, but if you say drop table, my tab, even if there are people inside it, you are demolishing the entire house. Everything is gone. The house and the people inside it are gone, right? Alter table, if you say, and you use the drop clause, you are removing only one column from the table. The table itself will still be there, right? Only one column you are saying you are dropping out. So instead of having 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 columns, you will now end up with having only 4 columns, right? So that is what your alter table with the drop clause will do. Delete, again coming to this example, will not touch the house. Delete only works with the records inside the table or the people inside the house. It will only take out, let's say Tom and John are inside the house. Delete is used to take out Tom and John from out of the house. The house itself is not touched, right? So only the records inside the table will be deleted when you say delete. Right. So if you see select star from where is students, yeah. See, if you say delete, then only the records are thrown out, right? So the table itself is not touched. We haven't looked at delete yet, but I'm just telling you because there will be a lot of questions on that in between, right? So this is what delete does. Throw out Tom and John from the house or John and Mary from the house. Drop table students will remove the house. It will demolish the house with John and Mary and everybody inside it, right? And alter table with drop clause will remove only one column from the table. Table itself will be intact and the remaining part of the records also will be intact. I hope you are I hope you're fine with this, right? Okay. Yeah, okay. Thanks. So, yeah, Beam, I don't know if that is your real name. Do you have a question? If you have a question, please type. All right. So, truncate, we will come back a little later, right? Manohar, if you are getting error, please paste your query on the chat window. I can take a look. Okay. Right. So truncate, we will come back a little later, right? So we will quickly look at the insert update, the DML commands. Sharif, we don't have time to do revisions, right? Because it's a 4-day course. So as far as possible, let's cover this. Right. DML commands we have not looked at it at all, right? So we are just going to do DML right now. Okay. So hopefully these 4 commands are clear, right? Create, alter, drop and rename. Truncate we will come back later, right? So now coming to DML, this is when we talk about our John, Mary, Tom, and all, right? So if you have a table, like the students table, the insert command is used to put in new records, completely new records into the table, right? If you have to put somebody like Tom into this, Tom, Mysql, and 50 marks. So this is done using insert. Insert will add a new record into the table. Update is used to make changes to a record that already exists. For example, you want to change John to Jonathan, right? Let's say you want to change John to Jonathan. This can be done using update command. Delete command is used to remove a record from the table completely, right? So that is delete. To make change to an existing record, you use the update, right? Insert is used to put a completely new record into the table. So one common mistake people make is whenever they see a null value, right? So they think of inserting. They think they want to insert a value into this because it happens to be null, right? That is not insert, because this is a record that is already existing. If the record already exists and you want to make any change to it, you have to use the update command. Insert is used only to put a completely new record into the table, right? So don't, it's an intuitive mistake to make, right? When you see null, you think of inserting some value into it. But the record already exists. So what you need to do is you need to update, right? So we have already used the truncate. We have not seen yet. I think you were not in the class. Yeah, Ankita, what is the problem? Error. You have an error. Please see if you have given a semicolon in the line before this. Right. Select star from students. Yeah, it's possibly in the line before that you have not terminated with a semicolon. So that could be the problem, right? All right. So let's see. Manohar, I don't see your. Okay, insert into patients values 1, Ramu 20. It looks okay to me. Insert into patients values 1, Ramu. Manohar, if you can paste the error you are getting, then you can. I'll see. There is somebody called Beam. I really don't know if he really has a question. Please put your hand down, right, if you don't have a question, otherwise it will keep. Aditi, normalization is not part of this, right? It will not be possible for us to go that much into depth in a 4-day session, right? But in regular classes, yes, we do cover normalization and other advanced topics. Okay. Right. So coming to insert, right? So we have already inserted a record. So how do we do that? We say insert, right? We will say insert into. Okay, Manohar, if it is coming no database selected, then you didn't say use followed by your database name. Right. So the moment you open your workbench, the first thing you have to do is you have to say use followed by the database name. If you are using example DB, you have to say use example DB. Then only your commands will work. Right. So give that and then try your commands. All right. So now let us look at insert. Right. So what are the different ways in which we can write the insert command? Why did I go so far? Okay. So how do I do that? We can say insert into students values. Joins will be covered, yes. Values, right? Now we have to specify all the values one by one in the same order, right? So I have 4 columns, so I have to specify values for all the 4 columns. So I will say 3, probably Pete and MySQL. And finally, let's say he has got 78 marks, right? So this is one way of inserting records where you specify values for Lokesh, yes, constraints. I think the agenda is shared with you, right? You can please go through that. So those things will be covered. So insert into students values, right? So 3 Pete. So all 4 columns I am specifying values. So this is the first way to use MySQL, insert. But sometimes we may not know the value for a certain column, right? So let's say I don't know which course my particular student is taking, but I know everything else, right? So I know his name, I know his student ID, I know his marks, but I don't know what course he's taking. So one way is I can say insert into students, right? 4. I know the name of the student. His name is Larry, but I don't know what course he's taking, right? So I can say null, no codes or anything, right? I'll say null. Null basically means I don't know, right? But I know his marks. He has got 89 marks, right? So this is how you can enter it. The other option is, instead of specifically putting null values, I can say I am going to give values only for 3 columns, right? I don't know the course value, right? So I'm going to give values for only 3 columns. So how do you specify that? You will say insert into students, and I am going to give value for student ID, student name, and marks, right? I don't know his course. So I'm going to give values only for these 3 columns, right? So now I say values and I enter only 3 values. I say 5, let's say Harry, and he has got 77 marks, right? So this is the second option. Oh, std_id, right? It's not sid. We changed the name. So this is now called std_id, right? Yeah, thank you. I didn't notice that. I forgot that. So std_id, student name and marks, and I give values only for these 3 columns, right? So this is the second option. But now if you see the table, the result will be exactly the same like before, right? So here, so in the case of Larry, right, we specifically specified null. So you see null inside this. In the case of Harry, right, we did not specify a null for the course, right? So we just said we don't know what it is. So MySQL has taken the responsibility of putting null into this column, right? So that is the difference between these two. Here you specify values for all columns, and here only for specific columns, right? So this is the second way of using your insert command. The third option is you can insert Manohar, yes, that is right. So the third way is you can insert multiple records using the same insert, right? So if you have to insert 10 records, you don't have to keep saying insert into, right? Instead, what you can do is you can say insert into students values, right? So let us say 6, George, and he is learning analytics, and he has got 66 marks. right? So now close the bracket. Now give a comma, open bracket, and give values for the next record, right? 7, Lara, let's say dance, and she has got, let's say 98 marks. So second record is completed, right? So now give a comma, open bracket. Now we can enter the third record, right? So you can say 8, King, and he learns management, and he has got 88 marks, right? So like this, you can keep on entering as many records as you want. Once you are done, once you have given all the values, you can give a semicolon, enter, right? So now if you check your table, you can see all 3 records have been inserted at the same time, right? So these are the 3 ways in which you can write your insert command. Give values for all the columns, or give values only for specific columns, and use the same insert command to insert multiple records, right? So these are the different ways of using your insert, right? So now we will see how to do update, how to make changes to records that are already inserted into the table, right? So to do that, the first thing that we need to do is we need to correctly identify a record, right? So we have to correctly identify a record in the table. So, so let's say I want to change John to Jonathan. So first I have to correctly identify that this is the record that I want to change. I shouldn't change Harry to Jonathan, right? So to identify a particular record, we will be using what is known as the where clause, right? So the where condition will correctly identify a record. So if you look at our table, you can use student ID to identify a record because you have unique values for different student IDs, right? In our case, you can also use the student name to correctly identify a record because you don't see any duplicate values for names, right? But I cannot use course to identify a student. If I use Mysql, right? So give me the student who is taking Mysql, then there are 2 people who are taking Mysql, right? So I cannot use course to correctly identify a record. Similarly, I cannot use marks also to correctly identify because some people might have the same marks, right? So we have to, ID is a primary key. We'll talk about primary keys later, right? But for the moment, we need to find a column, right, which we can use to correctly identify a record. So I can say where student ID is equal to 1, right? So there is only one record for which student ID is equal to 1. So MySQL knows that this is the record that needs to be modified, right? So how do you say modify this? You will say update the students table, set the value of the name column, right? So set the value of student name column to be equal to Jonathan. For which record? Where the student ID is equal to 1, right? So this is your update command, right? So the way the command will execute is it will start from the bottom. It will first identify which record needs to be changed, right? So here we are saying student ID is equal to 1. So it will correctly identify this record. Now it will see which column needs to be changed, right? So now we are saying student name, you change it to Jonathan. So it will go to the student name column and this will be changed to Jonathan. Of course, we are making the change in the student state, right? So this is one way, right? I can use the student ID to make changes. Yeah, it is very much necessary to specify. So the question here is it necessary to specify the condition where? Definitely you have to say where clause, right? We will see what will happen if you don't specify the where clause, right? If you don't specify the where clause, right? So then what will happen is it will assume that you want to make the same change to all the columns, right? Everything will get changed to Jonathan. So when you are writing update and delete, you have to be very, very careful about your where clause. Any mistake you make in the where clause, you will end up changing the records that you don't want to change, right? So sometimes you will end up updating the entire table, right? So this is extremely important. Okay, so here we have used the student ID to identify the record. I could have used the student name also, right? Because in this particular table, every student has a unique name, right? So it's not an issue. So I can say, let's say I want to, okay, let's first try this. Okay, let us take another example. Let's say George wants to change his course from analytics to data science, right? So instead of using student ID to identify this record, I can use the student name also. How will I do that? I have to say where student name is equal to George, right? So now it will see that in the entire table, there is only one record where the student name is George. So now what do we want to change? We want to set the value of the course to be equal to data science, right? In the students table. So update the students table, right? Set the value of course to be equal to data science, where the student name is equal to George, right? So let me try this. So let's try these two things, right? So first thing I will say, Uday is asking, is it possible to interchange student ID 1 to student ID 5? All values. I'm not sure what the question is. You want to interchange this? I think if that is it, yeah, it is possible in this particular scenario. Right? But let me try this one. So update students, set the value of student name to be equal to Jonathan, where the student ID is equal to 1, right? So now if you check your table, you can see for the first record, John has been changed to Jonathan. How about this one? Update students, set the value of course, right? So we want to change the course is equal to data science for George, right? For, sorry, not for, where student name is equal to George. By the way, this is not case sensitive, right? I can try this also, it will work. Right. So now if you check your students table, George's course has been changed to data science, right? I can change multiple columns at the same time. Probably Lara wants, let's say King wants to learn dance also, right? And he has, now he's getting a mark of 38, for example. How do I change both? I can say update students, right? So we can say update students, right? We want to change two things, right? So we will say set the value of course to be equal to dance, right? Comma, marks to be equal to, no quotes. Let's say now it is 38, where student ID is equal to, what is King's student ID? 8, right? Or I could have used student name is equal to King, whichever. So now both columns will get changed simultaneously. Aditi is asking, G in George was capital, then also query executed. How? The reason is because it doesn't care, right? So MySQL is case insensitive. Case insensitive. So it doesn't understand the difference. It will think that George and George are the same, right? It doesn't differentiate based on the case, right? So that is what it means. Okay, let's try to change two columns at the same time, right? So we will say update, right? So update students, set the value of course to be equal to dance and comma marks equal to 38, where student ID is equal to what is King student ID 8, right? So now if you check, King is learning dance, right? But his mark is now 38. So both columns have been changed simultaneously. Finally, what will happen if you don't specify a where clause? If you don't say where, it will think you want to update the entire table, right? So if I say update student, before that, right? So before that, let's change the null values, right? So that is an important thing to do, right? So let's change the null values. Let me remove all this. See, wherever I have null value in marks, right, I want to, or let's say wherever I have null value in course, I want to set the mark to be equal to 0, right? So I'm identifying the records based on the course column, and whenever the course is null, right, I want to set it to 0, right? So how am I identifying the records? I'm saying wherever course is 0, sorry, course is null, right? Set the value of marks to be equal to 0 in the students table, right? Update students, set the value of marks is equal to 0 where course is equal to null. But here, because we are using null, you cannot use any kind of arithmetic operators, right? If I say equal to null, nothing will happen, right? So if I type this, right, if I say update students, give me 2 more minutes, right? So we will just look at update and we'll wind up. Okay, so update students, set the value of marks is equal to 0 where course is equal to null, right? So here it says 0 rows affected, which means no rows have been changed, right? So the reason is because you cannot use, see, you course is null, right? Marks is still 89 and 77. So the only thing that you can use with null is the is operator. You can say where course is null, right? Or you can say where course is not null. Wherever the course is not equal to null, do something, right? So is null and is not null are the only things that can be applied on top of null data type, right? So all I need to do is I have to replace the equal to with is, right, where course is null. Now it says 2 rows affected, right? So now if you check your table, you can see wherever the course is null, the marks have been changed to 0, right? So this is one thing you need to be very careful about whenever you're using null. Finally, the last option, you say update students, right? So set the value of course is equal to Mysql, but you forgot to give the where clause, right? So set course is equal to Mysql, right? And you didn't say where. So Mysql will think you want to change every record, right? So now if you see, for every record, the course has become equal to Mysql, right? So this is how you can use your update command. These are the different ways of using update. Okay, the question is how to use subquery using select, insert, update, and delete. Subqueries are a bit advanced topic, which we cannot cover within 4 days, right? So these are part of the regular course, but here we will, so please do refer to your day-wise agenda, right? So there, whatever is given there, those are the things that we will be covering. Okay. Okay, fine. Can we quickly look at delete, or let's do that tomorrow maybe, right? Let's do that tomorrow. So let us stop for today. Yeah, tomorrow, yes. Fine, then I'll stop for today, right? The practice table, I will tell you how to use, right? Thanks, Jyoti. I'm glad that you liked it. Yeah, how to use practice table, I will tell you tomorrow. Okay, fine. So let me stop for today. We will meet again tomorrow. Right. Yeah, good night. Have a great time. Bye. Mukesh, I'm stopping. Thanks, Ankita. Mukesh, are you there? Can I stop?
Yes, Gitka, you can stop your screening. That's
okay. Thank you.